Hi, I'm Dr. Quinton Morris, artist, scholar in residence here at Classical King FM and also here at Meany Center for the Performing Arts. I have the distinct honor and privilege of welcoming three fantastic artists that are going to be performing for you on your concert series very, very soon. The first is Simone Dinnerstein. Second is composer Joe Phillips. And finally, a very special University of Washington drama student, Taylor Freeman, will all be performing here on your concert series. One fun fact is that Simone has been nominated for a Grammy Award. And I just got to kind of fanboy out on that because I think it's kind of a big deal. And so, Simone, I got to first ask you, how does it feel to be nominated?
Oh, it's tremendously exciting. And I was completely surprised. And it's just, I'm still excited. And it's like a week later.
I mean, that moment that it's announced where you just like, oh my God, or was there a part of you that was like, yeah, I got this?
Oh no, I was completely just totally surprised and shocked, and I nearly fell off the bed.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you're coming to Seattle very soon to perform this music. You've been working with Joe, and you're going to be collaborating, of course, with Taylor. So, can you tell us just a little bit about this very special collaboration and how it came about?
Yeah, well, the concert is a combination of three different works. It starts with Joe's piece, which I had heard. I heard the pianist Laura Downs playing some of that a few
Yeah.
years back, and Laura is a friend of mine. And also, Joe is, as well as being a fabulous composer, he's also a music teacher at PS 321, which is the school where my husband teaches, and where my son went to school, and where I went to school, and my mother taught. So there's a lot of connections here with Joe. And in fact, I believe that when he first wrote this piece, Joe, didn't you have my husband's class narrate it? Do you remember that?
Yeah, there was when the premiere was going to happen with Laura, we kind of combined some classes to actually recite some of the text for
Yes.
in the piece. So yes, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you should speak more about the text, because you took this enormous poem and you shortened it down for your work.
Yeah, yeah. The piece itself, was Laura had. It was for her. She was doing a album called America Again, I believe it was called, and she wanted something to go to go on that album. And so I said I hadn't written anything that would go with her theme of the album, but I would write something for her. So we talked about this particular the Langston Hughes poem, "Let America Be America Again." And I had read it many years ago as an undergrad, but it's kind of revisiting, and I was struck by how this poem kind of balances the love of America, but also being critical of America as well, and how that. And this was 2016. How this poem kind of. This was 1930, so it still spoke very clearly to 2016. And so I didn't really want to use, it was a piano piece, so I didn't want to use the whole poem. So I just kind of picked certain phrases out of the poem that spoke to me. And in particular, some of the things that spoke to the hope of even though we might be critical of America, and that the hope that is still there to reach those ideals of that America strives for.
Hmm. Hmm. And so that's beautifully said. I really appreciate that. I guess my question is, how has things changed for you as a composer Do you hear the piece differently now versus when you first wrote the piece? I mean, because there's been such social uprise over the last, 20 months since really COVID hit. Um, do you hear the music differently? Do you hear the words differently? Do you wish that you could go back and put new words in from the poem? Or, like, what's
Right.
kind of your perception of the music now?
It's interesting because I like to think of myself as a realist, but also optimistic as well. And yes, these last 20 months or what is 2 years really
Mhm.
have been very challenging, not just for the pandemic wise, but sort of socially as well. And I don't know if I would go back. I'm not one of those that goes back. I'm to sort of it was what it was at that time. But I can, when I think of what America is today and how a lot more people kind of, I think with all of the things that happened with George Floyd during the pandemic, it just it put a light on a lot of things a lot of people already knew, and it made people sort of think about how and question, I guess, what America is and who's included, who's not included in those ideals of what America stands for. So I think the piece for me doesn't necessarily um, read any differently. I'm still hopeful. Still feel that critique of America and America's supposed ideals of inclusion and freedom. But I also think that the piece, as someone who is hopeful, that those ideals of America are beautiful. I mean, including everyone. If you actually, the words of all people are created equal, all men created equal. If you really believe, if it was really, if America treated those words truly, then that's a beautiful sentiment, and it would be wonderful if that was the case. And I think the idea of the protest, what showed is like critiquing, like, no, it's still not quite where it should be, and I love that never has been yet. The title of the piece, and this is also a line in the poem, that we profess it to be this great, wonderful place, and it's not quite there yet, but it doesn't mean it can't be that. And that's how I feel still, even today.
Great.
I think I might add that so this piece is for piano and narrator, and that's why we have Taylor Freeman from university is going to join me to narrate the poem while I'm playing. But the other piece on the program, which is quite a large piece. This piece is quite short. It's about 6-7 minutes long. The other piece is an American Mosaic, and it was written by Richard Daniel Poor in the summer of 2020. So actually, while we were in the middle of all of these different protests and, the height of the pandemic, and it's a piece of music that Richard wrote to pay tribute to all different parts of society, and also to, there are movements that are describing, what he calls the visible enemy, which for him was Trump. It's interesting that your piece was written in 2016, kind of anticipating everything that was about to happen, and Richard's piece is written, in the middle of all of this. And I think the reason why I thought that Joe's piece would work well in this program is that it gives yet another angle to our idea of American society, which is kind of depicted musically in American Mosaic as well.
That's beautiful. And I think, kind of, Taylor, to you, like, how do you go about preparing for your role? And I am going to say, I mean, as a narrator, it's a role, right? Being an actress, hearing the words of the composer and hearing from the performer, how do you go about kind of shaping and phrasing the words so that you are able to capture the true essence of what the music, the performer, and the composer are trying to convey. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yes. To prepare, I've been listening to the piece as well as the album kind of together, seeing the similarities, seeing maybe some of the differences, kind of seeing what all the piece means, but more specifically, what does the piece mean to me, and how am I speaking the words? How are those individual words like ringing to me as an individual? Just kind of like going over that, sitting with the piece for a little bit, listening to it, pausing, taking some moments of silence, reflecting. And that's been pretty much my level or mode of attack on the piece, to kind of just sit with it and see what it means to me.
Well, what does it mean to you?
To me, as a Black woman in America, this piece is very important because it just kind of talks about and discusses the way in which maybe Black Americans are experiencing the injustices that are going on in our country. And also just to those individual words, it's especially, with it also being Langston Hughes' poem, like what are the similarities and the parallels we're seeing from the time that the poem was written to the time that is now.
Great. Thank you. Simona, we're just about out of time. I have one last question for you. What do you anticipate that the audience will feel, or what is it that you want them to experience with your upcoming performance?
I think that basically the music itself in the program is very thoughtful and moving and meditative, and some parts of it are dynamic, and there are lots and lots of different images that one can hear, that one can see and hear in music. So I think that it's a piece of it's going to be a program that's going to feel relevant to everyone who's listening to it. It's a program that's going to reflect the time that we've just been through, even if it doesn't specifically mean the same thing to each listener, which I certainly wouldn't expect it to mean the same thing for each person.
Wonderful. Thank you all so very much for taking a few minutes to talk with me about this very exciting upcoming program. I certainly hope that everyone who comes to this performance is able to process and really take the art of collaboration away with them. I hope and that people also are inspired by this very special collaboration that is deeply rooted not only in music and in theater and in literature, but also in self-expression, which I think is really the pure essence of what this performance is all about. And I hope that you all will come and hear Simona's performance. Thank you. Take care.